Today, I believe that President Trump has a generational opportunity to unleash a new economic golden age that will create more jobs, wealth, and prosperity for all Americans.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is Scott Bessent, who, of course, is Trump's pick for Treasury Secretary, talking about the golden age that Trump is about to unleash. And, of course, digital assets are going to be a major part of that. Now, just yesterday, he appeared in front of a hearing and he was asked specifically about CBDCs. Now, the interesting thing here is it very much looks like both Trump and Bessent are very much against CBDCs. So, how is the dollar going to be tokenized? Well, I believe this is going to fall upon the shoulders of private companies out there like Circle, and related to this video, Ripple. We've been talking about this for a hell of a long time. We will be recapping on what we had to say a while ago, but the first thing for us to do is to dive into what he said on CBDCs just yesterday. And then, of course, we can speculate, are America really not going to digitize dollars? Are they not going to harness this technology to do that and solve some of the issues with the traditional financial system? Well, they're not going to do it through a CBDC. So the question is, how are they going to do it? They're likely going to do it through companies like Ripple. So once we played this, we'll then look at what Brian Brooks had to say a long time ago in front of a congressional hearing in regards to the US actually leveraging stablecoins to maintain dominance globally. So let's dive into the next clip of yesterday's hearing.
I do want to talk with you for a moment about CBDCs and some of the push that the Biden administration had. They did an executive order for Treasury to research development of a CBDC in the United States. And of course, this causes a lot of us heartburn because we look at what the CCP did with the digital yuan in connection with the Olympics. So upon confirmation, how would you approach this discussion of CBDCs? And are you for them or against them? Could you end the Biden administration project to create a U.S.-based CBDC?
Senator Blackburn, thank you for your remarks. I may have a little trouble disciplining the two behind me, as I'm sure that I will hear that a U.S. Senator has vouched for their behavior.
Yes.
But on CBDCs, I see no reason for the U.S. to have a central bank digital currency. In my mind, a central bank digital currency is for countries who have no other investment alternatives. So if we think about a reserve manager, a high surplus country, whether it's Saudi Arabia, Singapore, who ends up with, call the Chinese currency whatever you want, the yuan, the RMB.
Yeah.
If you own that currency, you have to have something to invest in. There's very little to invest in if you want to hold the currency. You could own Chinese government bonds, which don't yield very much. So
your view of that would be a negative view?
Well, I view that many of these countries are doing it out of necessity, whereas the U.S., if you hold U.S. dollars, you could hold a variety of very secure U.S. assets.
Now, the question has to be asked, if they aren't going to digitize the dollar via a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, how are they going to do that? It's going to fall to private companies to do that, to ensure the dollar's role globally. And he also speaks about investable assets. The US debt markets are a burden. They are colossal. And ultimately what we're going to see is a alleviation, not a solving of the debt problem, but an alleviation of it through actually backing stable coins. This is an investment in US government debt through essentially propagating stable coins. And this is going to be championed. This is going to be embraced to the fullest. We're going to dive over to a clip very shortly about Brian Brooks. But this is ultimately extremely bullish for Ripple as a company, which was yet to IPO and become public, and one of the largest companies in the world, I believe. That's all still to come. But XRP is an asset that's going to facilitate all of this. Of course, real USD, back when we were talking about this years ago, wasn't even a thing. We'll be doing a quick recap in regards to what we had to say a while ago and how that's all coming true. But this is very much reiterating what Trump has already previously said. Let's dive into that clip, and then let's talk about Brian Brooks and what he had to say, and the role that stablecoins and companies like Ripple are essentially going to play.
And this I do for Vivek, because he's very big into it. I happen to agree with him, but he said, could you mention this? I will never. He said, I love Vivek. I love him too now. I didn't love him when he was running, but I like him now. It's amazing the way you can like somebody when you win, right? But Vivek is great. He's really great. But he wanted this, and I'll give him full credit for it. It's very important, actually. I will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency.
The CBDCs are not something that's coming. Stablecoins very much are CBDCs in many regards, in regards to the programmability of them. They're just not issued by the central bank. Ultimately, I think this is kind of a bit of a trick that's potentially being played on us. You know, I do think stablecoins have negative ramifications. Certainly for a company like Ripple, there's a lot of positives. You know, they're going to be championed. This is how the US maintains global dominance technologically and also fiscally, is through their private companies. Look at the taking over of Bitcoin and what's taking place. Do you really think that they're not going to innovate and create a digital dollar? Well, how do they do that if not through central bank digital currencies? They do that through private-public relationships. Ripple is a private company. They're in the best position working with financial institutions globally to not only custody all of these assets, but essentially facilitate them. And XRP is a staple part of that, ladies and gentlemen. I truly believe XRP is going to play a front and center role in money of tomorrow. What I want to do now before we dive over to our recap is just dive into what Brian Brooks had to say on all of this in a hearing about a year ago.
How do we ensure the U.S. dollar remains the reserve currency?
Well, Mr. Lukemeyer, it's terrific to see you again, and I'd give you a couple of thoughts on that important question. One is, if we start with stable coins before we talk about other crypto assets, I've said for a long time that the secular reduction in dollar holdings as a percentage of global central bank holdings is alarming. And this has been going on for more than 10 years at this point. So dollars as a share of the European Central Bank, the Japanese Central Bank, et cetera, has shrunk from 80+% to more like 60+% in a short amount of time. What that tells me is that in the future, with the rise of China and other major economies, the US dollar can't take its primacy for granted, and we need to start thinking about competing on utility, on features, not just based on a post-World War II monetary system that we could take for granted for the last 2 generations. And that's one of the reasons that I've been such a supporter of internet-enabled dollars, which allow us to compete on features, not only on history. I think that's really critically important. The second thing I would tell you is, as we enter year 11 or 12 of a highly inflationary environment, after all, we've been printing enormous numbers of new dollars since the financial crisis, there will come a time, gradually then suddenly, when the attractiveness of the dollar relative to other currencies could change. One of the benefits of the crypto economy is that it creates some counter incentives on the part of the Fed to do that kind of policy, because people will flee to other kinds of assets. And that sort of market competition is something that I think will ultimately shore up our monetary policy and keep the dollar where it rightfully ought to be, which is as the dominant reserve currency it's been for all of our lives.
For the sake of time, he did also talk about actually debt and how stablecoins can be backed by debt. And really what's happening here is we're kind of democratizing debt. We're opening it up to everybody instead of it being a kind of central bank or bank to bank kind of thing that they hold as an asset and et cetera, et cetera. We're actually now pushing that out to the masses as a whole. That's what's happening here. This is a fundamental change that's taking place and leveraging everybody up on that debt. And stablecoins are going to do that. I don't think there's potentially that big bust coming at some point, but at that point, everyone's leveraged and has no other choice other than to use it. And if you think geopolitically, we're democratizing the dollar in the sense that anybody with a mobile phone can now get access to it. So this huge amount of demand for it is going to come, and it's going to help to sort of solve a lot of the issues with the financial system. What I want to do now is play a clip that we made ages ago. I was actually walking around a forest in Croatia. It's about 7-8 months ago, talking about this prospect, and this is now happening with the likes of Besant, with the likes of Trump saying no CBDCs. Who's going to digitize that dollar? It's going to be private companies. They're going to solve debt issues as a result of that through essentially democratizing debt and using debt to back those stable coins up. That brings features like yield on a, you can literally hold in your bank eventually or your crypto wallet dollars and get whatever percent it is. in regards to tokenized money market funds and debt instruments and things like this that can be used to back up these stable coins. This is pretty serious. This is a kind of once in a lifetime opportunity where actually a technology is taking over how we do finance and money itself, and Ripple is in that core position. This is why you're seeing a lot of the price action despite perhaps bad news around the appeal, etc., etc. So let's dive into what I had to say, and then we'll look at the price and we'll wrap things up.
I just think there's more probability that it does than it doesn't. So the actual turning on and the usage of XRP would see it do phenomenally. And we have previously made a number of videos where we've actually spoken about the fact that the US is likely going to have Ripple as one of those unicorn stocks, one of those enablers, if you will, because the US really maintains its role as a global leader through the companies that reside within it, that they ultimately have control over. Things like Google, things like Facebook, things like Amazon, these kind of companies, you know, ultimately give the US a great amount of power. Why do you think China doesn't allow any Apple, any kind of companies like that within their country? And why do you think we don't let Chinese companies within the United States? Or certainly we try and sort of limit them when it comes to technology, because the amount of power that these companies have and thus give to the nations that they reside in and ultimately are under is insane. And if the US want to maintain, which was mandated by Biden, their position, their standard as a global leader in technology and as in the world as a whole, they're going to need a company like Ripple to help them do that, to help them harness the digitization of everything and actually revolutionize the dying system that they currently have. And I don't think there's anybody in a better position to help the United States than Ripple and, of course, subsequently XRP. And we saw recently a bill get passed that essentially saw, it's obviously got to go to the Senate now, it certainly got through the House of Representatives. We saw a bill get passed that essentially is trying to stop a central bank digital currency, a CBDC, from being issued by the government or the Federal Reserve. So the question is, who then digitizes the dollar? It's likely, in my opinion, going to be Ripple. And they already are trying to facilitate a stablecoin. Very coincidentally, they've obviously known about that for a hell of a long time. That news didn't get as much attention as I think it needed to. And if you look at who currently is the largest issuer of United States dollar stablecoins, it's Tether. That is a big no-no. And the US, I don't think, is going to have that. What they're essentially going to do is look for a company that resides within the US. Okay, remember the Federal Reserve can't actually do that because of this bill. It's still got a little bit of a journey to go before it's sort of wrote into law. But they're going to look for a company to essentially enable them to digitize the dollar and issue dollars and help it maintain its sort of world reserve currency status. I believe that they are going to look to Ripple to do that.
You can see I had a little bit more hair back then. That was about 8 months ago now. But it's all happening, guys. And you know, are the US really going to miss out on this technological innovation? No, they're not. They are going to digitize the dollar. Well, who's going to do that? That has to be the question. I'm sure Circle will play a role, but I think Ripple more front and center. And obviously, since I made that video, we've got the likes of Brad Garlinghouse in the White House. It's all coming to fruition. Ultimately, we have told you guys what we believe is going to happen in terms of price. We're on our way to $19.27. You are at all-time high resistance. It's very common that all-time high resistance acts exactly as that. You get a bit of a pullback before that continuation. Ripple did break out of that smaller pattern that we've been highlighting for you guys. Very much just a bull pennant. It broke out, it retested, and now it's seen that continuation. It's very much made its short-term target for that, but there are broader targets ahead of us. So hang in there, guys. I don't think people realize just how huge XRP is going to be through the role that it's going to be playing in regards to fiscal dominance and, of course, technological dominance and adopted by the United States. That's it from me. Exciting prospects. I'm going to love and leave you on that note, guys. Thanks for watching. I will see you all in the next one.